Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Linda and Mary, for welcoming everybody in. And I also want to thank Meryl Troop and Stephanie Crowley, our ASL interpreters today. As we get started, the first thing I also want to acknowledge is that we are all here in Maine, the land we call Maine now, and we want to pay respect and acknowledge that the places that we gather, dance, and sing is ancestral Wabanaki land. We wish to pay respect to the Abenaki, Maliseet, Micmac, Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, and their elders, past, present, and future. So as we think of Maine and we think of this beautiful place, we at Ovations are thrilled right now to be embarking on this landmark project, which builds on many years in the past of having commissioned artists who live and work here in Maine. But right now it is more robust and more important than ever to support the artists in our communities. So we have commissioned 5 different projects. We started the week off, and this whole week is all in conversation with those artists and these projects. We started the week with choreographer Riley Watts. Yesterday, we heard from playwright and advocate Dee Clark. Today, we will hear from Kerem Durdag and Andy Happel. Tomorrow, our friends from the Abbey Museum will be here to talk about the project that we've commissioned in participation and partnership with them that will create a new presentation of Wabanaki storytelling for young audiences. And then on Friday, we hear from our friend Samuel James, the master musician. So with that, I'm going to welcome Kerem and Andy to the room, to the Zoom room. Hi,
Career
guys.
Builder Doug, right here. Career Builder Doug. I just saw that. Yep.
So let's get started, guys. This is a really ambitious project that you are embarking on. And I thought, let's just start. Let's back up a little bit from the very beginning and just learn a little bit about both of you first. And maybe in your introductions for everybody, talk about who you are as artists, who you are as humans in this world, and then also just give us a sense of who you are in this partnership. I'll start with Kerem.
Who am I as a human being? A witness. Where I am in terms of an artist, I've written plays, screenplays, but predominantly a poet, published. You can find me on Google searches. Been involved in theater for a long time. I used to be in the acting world a while back before the kids. I want to get back into it at some point soon, now that they're college bound. And in terms of this project, my very dear brother friend Andy is my collaborator. I am predominantly the one writing the dialogue and the lyrics. Andy works on the music, and together we work on the story. Together we work on trying to mitigate the level of, trying to mitigate the level of insanity together, sharing the burden.
I think that's your cue, Andy.
Hello, everybody. My name is Andy Happel, and I am a violinist and multi-instrumentalist from Scarborough, Maine. I'm speaking to you right now from my office at Waynflete School in Portland, where I'm the director of strings and chamber music. I also maintain a private music teaching studio in my home studio with over 60 students, so a bustling studio. And although Kerem and I were both at UNH back in the 90s together at the same time, we didn't know each other yet. But he and his future wife came to see my band.
And,
yeah.
Yeah, I loved it.
It was amazing to reflect on that. So so that's how we met more recently. I had been giving violin lessons to his daughter, Sophia, and we reconnected and reminisced those days back at UNH, and we have become very dear friends. And Kerem's experiences and stories are touching and profound and amazing, and I'm delighted to be helping him tell this story from the musical side, which is mostly my role. I'm also a sounding board for, as he said, for shaping the story, and having worked as a producer, I'm helpful in that way as well. So our collaboration is balanced and beautiful, and we're having a great time.
Well, and I just wanted to highlight one of the things you said, Andy, about how you guys, even though you were at school together, you and E together, but it was really being at a concert, and the power of live performance and what it means to share an experience like that and what it means to create relationships. Because I think that's a really big part of what we're all about here at Ovations as well. So we're talking around it. Let's talk about what it is. Tell Kerem, if you could share with folks, what is your vision? What is this piece that we call the Immigrant? And let me add to it just as to round out the question. So not only what is it, but give us a sense of what was your inspiration? What's your inspiration behind it?
So let me start with the inspiration, because I think the inspiration is a wellspring from not just the life I've led, but the lives that I've been part of in terms of the immigrant community. In Maine, I've been part of the immigrant communities for 20 years. I've been very involved with it, been an activist about it. I've been working on how to get the proverbial seat at the table. So I've been very, very involved with it. And I was also involved with it in Minnesota when I was in college. So the inspiration comes from the stories, my own predominantly, and this will reflect that, but also as an amalgamation of the first person voice of the immigrant, the first generation immigrant in the US and in Maine, specifically in Maine, with all the warts and the joys and all the pain and the hurt and all the conflicting emotions that comes with that. Because it's not an easy journey. It is a joyful journey, but not an easy one. And I think it needs to be told, specifically within the context of what the 21st century is. You have 75 million immigrant movement human beings all over the planet, of which 28 million are refugees. Other than the whole aspect of this country being formed by immigrants, it should be noted that if it wasn't for the immigrant DNA in our actual souls, we would not be present all over the planet. So we're all immigrants, right? So the question then becomes, how does one aid the voice in the 21st century and actually try to affect the arc of the narrative, specifically in Maine, where you have certain perceptions and misconceptions. And so I wanted to do that. And I wanted to do that in a form that reflects the diversity of me and to a very large extent of Andy, which is I'm an absorber of movies, of music, of theater, of poetry. And I don't feel it's a zero-sum game to exclude any of them. And so I want to include them. So this piece will be perhaps defined traditionally as a musical, but it's not necessarily one, because it is going to have an animation piece to it. It will have actually a mini movie in it. Obviously, it's got the songs, but it has a thrust of a dialogue that's also driven as if it were a play. So I would say it's multimodal. It's multi kind of platform. Neither Andy or I are subject to any of the definitions, which I think it also is part and parcel of what being an immigrant is. And we want to be able to surround the audience with a visual oral ambiance that reflects the voice of the immigrant. And I think it will be challenging for us, but at the end of the day, the audience, I think, will understand what it actually means to have these stories. Actually, that's the thrust. Andy, I give it over to you.
Thank you. I love that. Well said, and that codifies much of our conversation in the last year. One thing that I'm particularly through our conversation, we have come to a point of talking about this project as telling a story. That's the main point. So because in our early conversations, it's like, well, are we trying to create awareness about the issues surrounding immigration? No, we're trying to tell a story. Of course, those issues are going to come into it naturally. That's going to happen. We don't have to try to make that happen. We have to tell the story, which is amazing. And then all those other things will naturally be a part of it. And it's really amazing. The musical side of it, I didn't know that we were beginning the musical side of it when we did. Kerem brought me this song and he said, hey, what do you think of this? you know, I need music for this. What would you do? And so we wrote the first song together, and then he revealed the true nature of the project of testing the waters in that way. And I think because of that, the nature of the music so far, we have just 7 songs written out of probably 26, 30, somewhere around
30,
there.
30-ish, yeah.
30. So we have 6 or 7 done. I think the character of the songs and the music that has emerged so far, because the very first one didn't come from a place of, hey, let's write a song for a musical, because it came from the essence of the lyric and from the experience that he shared with me. It has a certain sound, a certain character that is different from what you might think of when you think of musical music. So I'm just so excited about it.
Yeah. So Amy, if I could say, I mean, the story is of a life, starts from a childhood all the way to the present. So it spans, give or take, 40 years. So in the epicness, we shall try to endeavor.
Well, and I'm thinking about our conversation we had yesterday with Dee Clark and her piece, which is a theater piece, and wants to bring visibility and light to the experience of those who have been sex trafficked. And what I'm appreciating, the similarity here is twofold. One is the responsibility you must feel for all these stories. You're telling stories that are a lot of people's stories. And then the other piece is that it's about the wholeness of a person's experience. So as you were saying, Kerem, it's not just the angst or the pain and the suffering, it's also the joy, it's the whole experience. So could you speak a little bit more about how, from an artistic process, how are you thinking about all these many stories? It's not your story. This is not the story of your coming to America. This is really a story that's brings a lot of stories in. Can you talk a little bit about your process, about how you're crafting that?
So it is a story of a person immigrating to the United States. And there is a linearity to that storyline, because there is, there's an old trick in the movies called a MacGuffin, where you actually have a object or something that actually moves the story forward. And this actually has a really, really cool one. But it's a story of a life. In this case, a lot of those stories are coming from me as a human being. And so they traverse my life. It interweaves with the other character, who happens to be my wife, who's a second generation immigrant. And so the storyline is informed by my and our experiences, as me as an immigrant, my wife as being somebody who's married to an immigrant, and us having call it interracial kids or interethnic kids. And so there is a point to it. There is the traditional arc, but we are going to utilize some creative means. We're going to have flashbacks. We're going to have a mini movie that will inform the audience about certain background elements. There will be an animation piece that is going to inform about a particular experience. But there is the thread of an end goal that this piece has, which we're not going to give away, but it's very much rooted in reality, in my personal reality. And so the audience is going to be taken on this journey, hopefully one that illuminates, elucidates, and reflects in quiet spaces of what I went through as an immigrant, what my wife went through, what we all go through when we talk about home. The definition of home is fairly elastic when it comes to the immigrant experience. I and Andy want to explore that and articulate that through our music, which will be this very cool interstitial weaving of traditions, of songs that Andy has figured out the key to. So it'll be very, very different. People have asked us, so is this going to be another Hamilton? No. But if you were to take pieces of Interstellar and pieces of The English Patient, pieces of some maybe pop songs that we all grew up to in the 80s, and mash them together something new is going to come out, and I think this will be it. But it is a epicness to it, and I hope with Andy to capture that, because all immigrants go through that. All of us go through that.
It's funny you mentioned Hamilton, because I actually had a similar experience when I experienced some of it from the first time. And I think what people are responding to, or at least what I'm responding to, is the energy of what you're doing, and the dynamism of it. It's, to your point, it has all these elements and it has all this energy, and it also feels utterly contemporary and now, which I feel like, to me, is what makes it a work that you respond to. And as an audience member, what are you hoping audience members, this is just my small experience from seeing and hearing some bits so far, but what are you hoping audiences will take away from this?
I hope they realize the truth of what an immigrant goes through, with all of its shades, with all of the entire spectrum of its existence. We all go through that, and I think that voice is important, specifically in Maine. Specifically within the context of what it means to be a citizen in the 21st century. And there will be some hard parts to it, because I think a lot of the conversation sometimes tends to get muted and reverted to, isn't that all fun? Yes, lots of it is fun, but there's some hard parts to it. And there is also the traditional element. There are a bunch of sayings, but a lot of the immigrant experience is defined by a certain amount of who you're bringing with your ancestral DNA, your cultural DNA, your birth DNA. You are talking about an experience which there's a transference of you from location to location to location. And it can be jarring, but at the same time, it's defining of us as human beings, because you end up stitching together a life, not any different than people anywhere else do. But the stitching is done under different circumstances. It's done under different set of expectations. And so I hope that by watching, listening, by observing this piece we're going to put together, I hope to some small, insignificantly small way, we can help inform, we can help repair, and we can help understand what it means to be us, not the other, but us. And that is not an easy single binary definition. There's a whole bunch of color associated to that, much like any musical piece we listen to, or comic books we read.
Thank you for naming the concept of the other. I think that's an important, and especially when we think about the arts and what the arts do to try to remove that sense of otherness, not to discount differences, but to also bring people together. You started to talk about some of those musical influences, and I've heard some, and somebody in the audience has actually asked, what are the musical traditions you're drawing from? And I can't wait for you to share with them the list of some of the music that you either are inspired by or informed by or listened to, but it's quite a list.
Well, so
yeah,
composing this music so far, I have drawn from cues that Kerem has sent me directly. So he literally sent me a list of, so he sends me the lyric. So here's the song, here's the new song. And then along with it, like 6 YouTube links from a song from Turkey, a song from Pakistan, a classic rock song from America, from Peter Gabriel, The Cure, Bruce Springsteen, like just in the same list. And he's like, I'm drawing the energy from somewhere in the middle of all of this stuff. And I'm just like so captivated by that and inspired. And so things that feel new are emerging, but it's the list is unbelievably diverse. And so it's almost like you listen to this list and you just think about it, and then you have to start from the feeling that you're left with. It's not like an inspiration like, oh, okay, you want it to be at this tempo or this rhythm or this time signature. it's not like that. It's a very pure place of feeling somewhere in the middle of all that.
Yeah, because part of it is that I grew up with a multiplicity of those inputs, like most immigrants do. So when I was growing up, I grew up with the Leonard Cohen's, the Springsteen songs, all the 80s, the 80s Bonanza collection, the 90s. But at the same time, I come from a tradition, in music tradition in Turkish and in Urdu, we are very oral tradition, and we are demonstrative, very passionate. If you're thinking of torch singing, that is very much a part of the Turkish and Urdu tradition. Also informed by Turkish and Urdu movies, which have an amazing amount of songs in them, very much like the Bollywood movies. So in my life, in most Turkish and Pakistani's life, songs are part and parcel of our communication mode. When we are talking, we'll break into song probably once at least within a 5-minute stretch. We'll start throwing poems at each other. Our reference points from our childhood is about songs, about movies. So there's a lot of visual and oral processing that we have just gone through, just because of the environments that we grew up in. So similarly, I mean, I love comic books. I'm a comic book fanatic, right? From Pakistan. I mean, think about it. So my worldview at some point got informed because I bought the first issue of Thor in 1974. I still have it. So, so things like that address the universality in some way. So what Andy's saying. So the goal is that anybody on the planet should be able to hear these songs and relate. It shouldn't be just, it's written in the US, or it was just written in Turkey, or just in Urdu, Hopefully it captures the entirety of the spectrum. You asked us about what we are as human beings. Well, this is what we are. Sometimes it's confusing, but sometimes it's also, there's a little bit of light that pops up.
Kerem, there's always light with you. That's one of the things I appreciate about you. I also love that, Andy, you just gave us a little example of your process, the collaborative process that you guys are engaging in, by the fact that Kerem gave you some lyrics. He gave you a list of 5 apparently disparate musical energies, which weren't disparate because they were all embodied by Kerem and his experience and his passions. Is this how you're working currently? Is this an example of that overall process? Is there more to know?
It's not completely how we're working. It just, we have some shared documents online that continue to develop in, they're dozens or perhaps hundreds of pages long at this point. And so embedded within these couple of master documents that have all these ideas on one side and then actual dialogue and lyrics on another side, there is a fair amount of that electronic trading of notes to each other in a live document and lists. But we meet up once or twice a week in person as well, and so it's not all electronic documents. And the in-person meetings that we have tend to be extended conversations about the story, the nature of the story, not so much the nuts and bolts of the composing or the music, but the shape of the entire thing and how that is emerging. And I mentioned I feel like a sounding board for Kerem. I try to pry him with difficult questions as a storyteller, and as he's trying to, like he said, he's trying to make this accessible for the audience, and I'm trying to help him do that with effective, not devil's advocate, but I'm trying to probe him with effective questions that will move this process forward. So our conversations in person tend to be about that, and that's most of our process at this point, but keeps changing.
Well, and we're all fortunate because you guys have been capturing some of that process. So I don't know if everybody had a chance in advance, but we have some video of some of the work to date that you guys have been working on and through. So it'll give our viewers an even greater chance to just sink in and really get a sense of, I mean, when you talk about it, and then to see what it actually adds up to. And again, to feel all of those energies of the different music styles, and to feel this arc of story, and to feel just even the beginning of, okay, this is a musical, there's poetry, we don't have a sense of the animation yet, but you can start to feel, I think the word epic keeps coming up in the chat for you guys. There is a very epic quality to this work, and it's not just about its size of hugeness, but it's really about what it embraces. It's more about, again, that energy of what you're embracing is a fullness that I don't know that we always see that. A lot of times, we focus in, and this is really, to me, feels like you're focusing out and sharing. We had a question, two things. We had a question that we missed earlier that came up very early that I wanted to get back to real quick because we don't want to lose it. But we were doing introductions, and one of the things that you didn't mention, Kerem, is that you are also a CEO.
Yes, President and Chief Operating Officer. I've had a very blessed career in running companies over the last quarter of a century, and I will leave it at that because Susan brought it up, and she's a very, very, very dear friend. It's very kind of her. Shout out to Emily and Rachel too. But yeah, I've been very fortunate. I have a left brain and a right brain that seems to try to coordinate with each other. And so, yeah, yes.
So, okay. So you two are multifaceted, not just your work.
Yes. I'm not defined by my work. One work. Never. So, yeah.
So I know we need to get close to wrapping up here, but just as you mentioned home earlier, which is such an important thing for all of us right now as we think about, we're all working closer to home. Where are you in your process? I'm curious to know are you working through we gotta get all the songs done, or we gotta get out, and then next we're working on the animation. Is it more organic than that? I'm just curious because you guys are already really into it. Where are you in your process?
No, we're pretty regimented. So actually, the animation is written out. I just have to animate it. The mini movie is blocked out for shots, and I'm working on that with a friend of mine actually in Pakistan and here. About, I would say, 40% of the dialogue is written. The scenes are blocked out, and as Andy said, we've written about 30 songs, not inclusive of the chorus that will also be part of it. The trajectory of the story is there. The MacGuffin that I mentioned is there. The ending is already written. The start is already written, and neither shall we really reveal it to anybody for the next many months. But so I think we're fairly well along. For me right now, the focus is to get through the dialogue throughout the whole thing, and then Andy and I will then apportion how we want to do the scene sequencing, because like I said, it's not going to be a linear time format. We'll probably move back and forth in a way that makes sense. So yeah, so I'm going to write it all out, and then we'll hack it, because I'm sure it'll be 5 hours long by the time I'm done with it. So we need to make it, relatively watchable.
You need another person in the room, the editor.
We could always go for the trilogy. So, the working title, I got asked, at the current time, it's Soul Roar.
Soul Roar, right.
Subject to change.
Amy, you mentioned that you asked us what we hope the audience is left with. And from the music side, I hope that the songs are good enough and memorable enough that the stories and the impressions and the ideas of this work will carry with them after they leave, because they remember the songs and as part of the whole thing. And so that's what I hope for. I hope that it will be carried forth. I have a little bit of a relief in that this duet, this sort of climactic duet between the two main characters was really, really important, central, and that song has already come. So it's
yes.
Like, oh goodness, we got that. That is just a epic showstopper.
Wait till you guys hear this. It is Andy's masterpiece.
And so now that that's done, it's just like, oh, you get 20 more songs? No, no problem. So we're in a good spot. It's fun.
Double
And-
album for sure. Double album for sure. Oh,
Double album and a trilogy. Okay.
yeah.
As we close out, realizing that Andy, you're not just the director of strings, you also have a performing life as well. Is there anywhere we can catch you these days? Are you performing? Are you Zooming? Are you in parking lots or drive-in? Well, obviously not parking lots and drive-ins. It's a little chilly for that, but anywhere we can catch you?
No, actually, I did not perform. I'm trying to think if I performed before the shutdown. I don't think so, because I usually start in March with my seasons of performing. So I'm taking it very, very careful. I'm concerned about the virus, and I have a family, so I'm not risking it going out to performance venues, even though I'm sure they're relatively safe for other people. So I have not been performing, which has been very strange. I've been performing consistently for 30 years, but it's been good in a way, because this project has emerged out of this shift in time. So yeah, I have not been performing, and I have no performances booked for next year at the moment. I'm going to hang back and make sure that I stay safe.
Great. Well, I'm glad that we can work with you, and at least this time have some opportunity for other creative pursuits. And I would just add that if you're going back into your albums or CDs from the 80s and 90s to dig into the list that Kerem mentioned, look for Thanks to Gravity in there. You might find, you'll find Andy, one of his former bands that I know. I had some of those CDs back in the day. So I wish you both very well and to stay happy and healthy. And we can't wait. The next time we see you, we'll hear some of we'll actually have an opportunity
Yes.
to hear and see some of what you're working on.
Yes. Yes.
Excellent.
And we'll be posting stuff online too as we go along, for everybody to hear.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Thanks for making time today for everybody. And thank you, everybody, for joining us, and Meryl and Stephanie for providing excellent interpretation. And we'll see everybody tomorrow, where we will have Sarah Coleman, our Director of Engagement, and she will be talking with our friends at the Abbey Museum about that project. And then again on Friday, we'll be back with Samuel James at noon. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you for coming, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.